Food for the elderly, nutritional needs, hydration. With aging, the act of eating becomes more and more complicated even as certain nutritional needs increase. How to adapt the diet of the elderly to prevent undernutrition? What place should be given to proteins? Answers with Véronique Liesse, dietitian-nutritionist. Elderly. What nutritional needs? Food intake decreases with age. An elderly person consumes on average 20 to 25% less energy than a young adult. But it is mainly because the elderly person moves less that their energy expenditure decreases. It therefore naturally adapts its contributions to its expenses. But there are other reasons. Loss of appetite because of an increase in circulating anorectic factors, intestinal changes, etc., faster satiety, isolation and loss of mobility that don't make you want to shop or cook. The minimum caloric intake of an elderly person is 1,500 kilocalories d. For a healthy elderly person, it is necessary to count 30 kilocalories per kilogram, while for a malnourished senior, it is necessary to aim for 30 to 40 kilocalories per kilogram. It is above all the protein requirements that are increased because there is a drop in the anabolic response to protein intake and a hypercatabolism linked to the diseases. In other words, the elderly person destroys more proteins and responds less well to intakes, uses them less well. Several objectives are then targeted: the maintenance of muscle mass, optimal hydration, as well as the compensation of any losses of assimilation, for example in zinc. However, the nutritional needs are adapted to the person and vary according to whether they are followed in a hospital, a retirement home or at home, continues the dietitian-nutritionist. Vitamins and minerals, the necessary level of which can only be reached, in particular to ensure cognitive and immune functions, if the daily food intake reaches 1,500 kilocalories d, also comprising essential fatty acids, such as omega-3. In a malnourished person, it is difficult to compensate because often, significant loss of appetite is accompanied by loss of assimilation. We can nevertheless increase the number of snacks per day and promote high-calorie meals, recommends the specialist. As for the diabetic person, medication follow-up and a balanced diet are necessary. As it is already difficult to make her eat, we avoid being too strict. The notion of pleasure is very important, even more so if the person is really old. In this case, pleasure will take precedence over recommendations because it no longer makes much sense to deprive them, adds Véronique Liesse. How much protein per week? It is essential to monitor and preserve muscle mass. For this, we take care to provide proteins such as meat, eggs, dairy products and fish. Vegetable proteins also contribute to protein intake but are more difficult to assimilate. Vegetarianism in really old people is complicated, remarks Véronique Liesse. Maintain physical activity with at least 30 minutes of daily walking. If the protein supply decreases, there is resynthesis only to the detriment of certain tissues, in particular the muscle. However, the decrease in muscle mass by sarcopenia represents a risk factor for weakening of the elderly subject. It is necessary to eat a varied diet, without monotony, which is the main cause of aggravation of the physiological decrease in taste. How to enrich the diet of an elderly person? To enrich the diet of an elderly person, it is necessary to increase the nutritional value of the dishes without increasing the volume. Each meal should contain a food rich in protein and energy. You can, for example, add melted cheese, butter, minced meat, eggs or even tuna crumbs to dishes, especially mashed potatoes and soups. It is also important to arouse pleasure with high-calorie foods such as filled pancakes, gratins, dessert creams or even rice pudding. Enriching the diet often involves the use of high-protein drinks because it's easier. There are a lot of calories in a small volume, underlines the dietitian-nutritionist. Weight loss, diets. What precautions to take? Not losing weight taking medication. Catabolic pathologies that increase the production of cytokines anorexigens. Loss of appetite due to the lower activity of on-demand neurotransmitters neuropeptide Y, ghrelin. Represent risk factors for weight loss. Any unrecovered weight loss is the cause of bad aging, the addition of these small losses eventually leading to many complications. Not dieting after 70. The watchword of Dr. Monique Ferry, geriatrician and nutritionist, is to proscribe diets after 70, with the possible exception of the salt-free diet which can be used, for a limited period, on medical prescription. And this, even when faced with a diabetic patient whose limited appetite makes it difficult to cover their daily needs, including carbohydrates. At the end of the meal, they can even treat themselves to pleasure sugars, since these will not suddenly increase blood sugar. Diet and cholesterol. Caution for patients with a little hypercholesterolemia. A preventive diet vis-a-vis cholesterol makes sense between 30 and 70 years. After this age, it is absolutely necessary to ban restrictive diets. Regularly weigh all older people. We must systematically weigh the elderly, just as we measure blood pressure, to react very quickly to weight loss. It is also necessary to inquire about the weight of previous years, to be attentive to pants that yawn at the waist, to a dress in which the patient floats. A lost kilo will be extremely difficult to make up for, all the more so if the lost weight is a few months old. According to Monique Ferry, experience also shows that the elderly age better when, at this age, the BMI is between 23 and 27. To promote anabolism, it is necessary to increase the consumption of protein in the morning and at noon. Precautions when a diet remains essential. If the diet is really necessary, for a prosthesis for example, or in the event of very heavy overweight, it is important not to make the elderly person lose weight anyhow. When the problem of weight arises due to a hip or knee prosthesis, you should not lose more than 10% of the initial weight, and this only over the long term, i.e. at least a year. The elderly person not only risks undernutrition and muscle loss, which will handicap rehabilitation, but also a rapid recovery of fat reserves during this rehabilitation, when the diet is no longer restrictive. Hydration for the elderly, tips for getting them to drink. The hydration of an elderly person remains the first point to monitor. The drink participates for more than 1 liter to the needs of the body, and the food brings the remaining liter. A decrease in food consumption frequently observed in the elderly is correlated with a decrease in hydration. Hydration units. To promote the daily practice of dietitians and nutritionists, Monique Ferry recommends the use of hydration units. A yogurt is equivalent, in terms of hydration, to a glass of water. Priority should be given to a sufficiently hydrating diet, especially rich in fruits and vegetables. Offer attractive drinks such as fruit juices. To make the elderly person drink, you have to offer them water often, even between meals. If there is a risk of going the wrong way, you can give gelled water.